right, I'd like to call the meeting to order. For roll call, appointment of alternatives. Serve for one of our open vacancies. Public hearing, we have none, and old business, applications 1, application number 18-02 of Robert and Christine Long, owners for the installation of a 14 by 20 prefab shed pool house in the upland review area to a wetland on property located at 2.5 Timber Ridge Drive, Assessors Map F06, Block 306, Lot 029, Zone R40 OS. Do we have the applicants here? Yes, good evening. Would you like to introduce yourself for the record? And
Sure. My name is Robert Long. Primary owner with my wife Christine of 2.5 Timber Ridge Drive. My daughter Megan, she's here to help.
will there be any excavation to put in the crushed stone? Will you be scooping out, or you'd be putting, it's on a crushed stone foundation?
Correct. Yep.
And will there be any excavation of soil to put the crushed stone, so you're just putting the crushed stone down on top?
Exactly, yep. Yeah, that area where the crushed stone and where the shed's going to be is on the eastern side of the lot, so it's farther away from the wetlands area, and it's level, it's dry, so it's literally just going to go right on top of the existing lawn.
Is it lawn all the way down to the edge of the wetland?
Correct.
The Commission may recall, you previously approved the in-ground pool that's in the backyard. So this shed, it's approximately 30 feet from the edge of mapped wetland soils. If they follow the grading plan for the pool and as the applicant indicated, there's limited disturbance, should be limited effect to the wetlands. The only thing that, just to jog the Commission's memory, the pool, there were several special conditions of approval, one of which had to deal with the watering of the pool, which the applicant agreed to. I just wanted to remind you of that, so that's still there in place associated with the pool. But really, this staff has prepared a draft approval on this. Should be fine.
Will there be any chemicals stored in the shed?
No.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
Real quick, we did have a staff report, right?
Yes.
For this?
It should
Okay.
should be in your package.
I didn't have one in my packet,
No,
but I know I read it before the meeting.
The staff report had two special conditions. One was pre-construction meeting required of the Commission's agent prior to the start of site work. And number two is that no activities are proposed within mapped inland wetland soils. Therefore, no authorization has been granted to perform such activities in conjunction with this permit. Violations of the scope of work approved by the Commission will be subject to an immediate enforcement action.
I'll make a motion that we find that this is a regulated activity because the proposed construction is in the upland review area.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I make a motion this is not a significant impact activity because all of the construction is outside the wetlands and the standard erosion sediment control features required by the or recommended in the staff report will be sufficient to protect the wetlands.
Second.
All, any discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
And make a motion that we approve the application, subject to the conditions in the staff report.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to application number 18-03. It's Sally S. Rieger, trustee, applicant, Simsbury Land Trust, owner for the construction of the small bridge over a watercourse in the wetlands on the property located at Hartford Road, Assessor's Map H15, Block 109, Lot 004, R40. And I will recuse myself since I'm on the board of the Simsbury Land Trust.
As will I.
I'll wait till you're gone, so you hear this. Do they now have a quorum? My name is Sally Rieger. It's R-I-E-G-E-R. I live at 9 Stodmore Road. I'm here on behalf of Simsbury Land Trust to ask for a permit for a small footbridge to cross a small stream on our Glover property, which fronts on Route 185, Princess Lane, and King Philip Road. So the stream runs roughly perpendicular to Route 185, and we are working on putting in a trail that will let people loop around. So there's already one way to cross the stream that was permitted, another small bridge, and we're going to make a loop trail, and this will be either out or return, but a second crossing. So it's a small wooden bridge. It has a width of about 5 feet and a length of about 8 feet, intended for pedestrian use and an occasional lawnmower to maintain the trail that's cut through the grassy flower area on the other side. And you should have a map, and you'll have a picture of the basic design in your packet. And it's pressure-treated wood of the newer, kinder variety that's going into the bridge. There's 2 sections of probably 2 2x6s, 5-foot long, going on the ground on either side, so we don't expect to remove any soil or create any soil disturbance. Those 2 pieces that are the base of the bridge that spread the weight wider so that there's less weight in any one place along the bank will be held in place by rebar. So there's no digging or excavation involved. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
How long has the other bridge been in place, the one you put in before?
You know, I don't remember. I think it might be 2 years. Do you remember, Mike?
It's about 2 years now.
Yeah, I think it's about 2 years.
And how's that holding up for you? Is it?
It's been fine. There's also a boardwalk there that both of these things were put in as part of the Eagle Scout project.
So all the construction will be done by hand?
All by hand, by volunteers, hopefully Saturday. Weather and volunteers cooperating.
Mm-hmm. That's good. If there aren't any more questions, we'll entertain a motion.
I don't have my cheat sheet, so I'm going to have to do this again by memory. I'll make a motion that this is in the that this is a regular activity because it's in the upland review area.
Second.
I think it's in wetland.
Oh, it's actually in the wetland. I'm sorry, because it's in the wetland. Yes, you're right. So I'll make a motion. It's a regular activity because it's in the wetland area.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll make a motion. This is not a significant activity because this is all done by hand and it'll be done in one day. So there's no reason to assume there's going to be any damage to the wetlands.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I make a motion that we approve this with subject to the recommendations from staff.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
All right, on to new business. Receipt of new applications?
You have one applications filed for the residents at 6 Poundside Lane, looking to do an addition within 60 feet of a pond.
All right, moving on to item 6, general commission business. Item 1, approval of the minutes on March 6, 2018, regular meeting. Are there any additions or changes to the meeting minutes? All right, being none, we'll just file them. And item 2, fracking ordinance. I understand we have people who would like to make a presentation tonight? Or do you have?
Fracking waste?
Yes.
Hi. My name is Renee DeGear-Bradford, and I'm a resident of West Simsbury.
I'm Holly Greenfield, I live in Simsbury.
I'm Holly McGrath, I also live in Simsbury.
And we're here to ask your support in banning fracking waste from our town. But in lieu of that, the state has used the same language in the state Senate Bill 103. And also the House, I just got word that the House, if the state continues to use the same, or the Senate uses the same language, the House Bill 5454 would include, they're asking that they include the same language as in the Senate Bill 103. And if the state passes this, it's a mute subject. We don't have to even talk about it here in Simsbury. But we would appreciate your support now in possibly going to our state representatives and asking them to ban the waste from coming to our town. It is a pollution issue more than anything. I do have the bill right here for everybody, along with a map of Connecticut of all of these towns that have banned the waste and use the same language.
Sure.
Thank you.
We're hoping that if the state passes it as is, we don't have to come back and ask for your support. But if it doesn't, we would ask that that you help support us at the selectmen meetings and ask that we ban the pollution from our town. We would like Simsbury to have the control instead of the state at that point, because the pollution would include heavy metals, chemicals that they cannot get out of the waste, as well as radioactive materials. Yeah. Do you have any questions?
So for the moment, you would hope that we, as individuals, perhaps might write to Kevin Whitkos, urging him to support S-103, and to John Hampton, urging him to keep an eye on Whitkos, and when Whitkos does his job.
We do.
Okay.
And also House Bill 5454.
5454.
I believe it's 5454.
I believe
Yeah.
Representative Hampton already is a co-sponsor of that bill, but yes, so any support to Senator Whitkos would be greatly appreciated.
So, I'm looking at the legislation, proposed legislation, you want to ban, not only, there's sort of two issues here, the sort of de-icing, the use of fracking waste in other activities where it may or may not be controlled appropriately and may seep into, I understand that. Part I struggle with a little bit is, without consideration or sort of proactively prohibiting any industry that would be for the purpose of appropriately storing the waste, which is what you actually want, is the waste appropriately stored, and also, you know, there are places to do it and appropriate ways to do it, and you would hope in the country there are some places, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in Connecticut. But I guess I'm looking for a little background on why you would prohibit a blanket prohibition on appropriate storage in an industry that would perhaps bring jobs to a state that's already struggling and things like that.
I can speak to that.
Yeah, sure.
The number of accidents and spills and leaks that historically have occurred so far in Pennsylvania suggest that while we might get some short-term money and jobs from storing the stuff, over time that might be outweighed by the health risks and the environmental risks, because once those things are spilled, they're the devil to clean up.
And was this all, do you have a name of, just where I could look, I'd like information on what's gone on in Pennsylvania? Has it been with one storage company in particular that's done the spelling?
Not one particular one, no, I just went around on the internet and looked at accident reports.
Okay.
So there are both scholarly articles and advocacy articles out there that you can find that'll pinpoint the places where there have been spills. The other issue that we were concerned with was leakage in transportation, that as it's coming to and from the waste that may leak out onto roads is going to end up in the soil and the water. Better not to have it here at all, we think.
I'm not sure that that's true. Fracking waste has to go somewhere. Fracking is, unless the ultimate goal is to ban fracking, which is a different issue altogether. I just not sure it's a Conservation Commission's, well, it is a Conservation Commission, I take that back. I have an issue with blanket prohibiting business that has not occurred, that yet poses no harm, and that may yet be done appropriately and could have, where, I'm not sure it's the appropriate time to weigh benefits versus harm when there isn't an actual thing to look at the time.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean by an actual thing.
So there's no actual company looking to store the waste here. We don't know what waste is actually coming, where it's actually going to be stored, how it's being stored, how it's going to be brought here, what the potential benefits of bringing it here are. And so making a blanket prohibition seems premature. I get it on the not using it in places where it isn't controlled, but you know, without looking this, and I'll admit that I haven't, and I am interested in looking at the accident reports and how prevalent it is within the industry, or whether there are good actors and bad actors, whether there is improvements that can be made. But at an early stage at a company where I don't have something to weigh against, or actually just to say we don't want it at all here, seems premature.
Okay, there's one other place I would direct you to check then.
Sure.
I've been looking a little at we have 3 hazardous waste sites in Connecticut, and then the wastewater treated at those sites then goes downstream to the municipalities. And from what I can understand, the municipalities are already fairly stressed to meet standards in what they're processing now. That does not include any hazardous waste. So I guess that would be one consideration, to think about whether, if we had an industry here that was treating fracking waste, once that material leaves a facility that's supposed to be treating it, how do we know it's going to safely pass through our municipal water treatment plants?
I completely understand that that's what we would look at. I guess my concern is that we have no idea how it's actually going to be treated now, how it's going, if it would be a stress on those municipalities, what municipalities it's going at, which ones are stressed and not, and to blindly take this position, it just seems premature.
One other thing though about blindly. Because the chemicals in the fracking waste, the chemicals put in come back out again as part of the produced water, and the companies that are doing the fracking won't tell us what's in that stuff.
Okay, that's an issue, and that would be an issue to ask to me, is to ask a company who's actually looking to do the business and to require some completely appropriate required disclosure of any business that's looking to do this kind of thing. I completely intend on doing some more research on this thing. I'll just tell you where I'm struggling is more with the premature, the
And then also
preemptive
maybe
ban.
looking at all of these hazardous waste treatment facilities and what their ratings are, and have they followed the laws? That's another issue altogether. and I personally would prefer to be proactive than reactive. It would be cost huge amounts to clean something up than to right now just ban them. I think Greenwich is having some issues right now. It wasn't fracking waste, but it was contaminated waste, and it's upwards of 20 million.
So I just have a couple of questions. One is in this sort of note that you have, are the items in blue underlying things that have been added to the language, or is that just?
Yes.
Okay.
That is the language that, everybody probably got a email from Mr. Glidden from what I had sent 3-4 weeks ago maybe. And it was our possible ordinance here locally.
Okay.
And it's the same language that's in the state Senate Bill 103. And we're just hoping that the state, passes this so that we do not have to deal with doing it on a town level. But there are 38 other towns in Connecticut that have already passed that language, or very similar language.
And do we currently have any fracking going on in the state of Connecticut?
No, we do not. No. The moratorium is up in July, and it does not include oil fracking, nor does it include the waste that happens before the fracking begins. And that is laden with heavy metals, what is it? Some chemicals because of the lubrication for the drill, and along with the radioactive material. That is natural in the Earth's core. So.
All right,
So we're just asking your help in hopefully passing it at the state level, and we know we have to go to the Board of Selectmen after this is taken care of on the state level, and we'll wait till the state makes some decisions. So we hope that you as an individual and that those here could maybe support this at the state level.
So we'll wait to hear what the state has to say. Well, thank you for bringing it before us tonight.
Thank you.
All right, on to item 3 for Simsbury Meadows.
I don't have a report to give you tonight. The town attorney and director of planning, the director of public works, town engineer, and town manager met and discussed this. There will be applications forthcoming at direction of the town manager. I can't tell you what activities. I was not in attendance to that meeting.
You can't tell us what forthcoming.
I don't have a timetable either. But it's at direction of both the town manager and the Bob DiCrescenzo, the town attorney. That's all I know.
So shall we keep this on the agenda?
I will keep it on your agenda till you see an application, so that you remember it's there.
This, speaking of Simsbury Meadows, this was the meeting at which Mr. Rabbit said he would bring us Mr. DiCrescenzo's response regarding Mr. Ryan's poorly reasoned letter. I take it Mr. Rabbit has not sent that.
I don't have anything. No.
Maybe keep that on the agenda as well. I mean, it does come under Simsbury Meadows, but it's, there's so much under that, so.
Is there, I kind of feel for Don on this one, is there a time frame from which we should, like, if we don't get something, we should be asking for a different kind of action? I mean, this has been going on for a while. We have a new town manager now, so so maybe you can give it a little bit more time, but it's getting a little.
Would you like me to draft a letter from the chair to the town manager, maybe requesting?
An action on the decision. Yeah, we are,
And I could put that on your agenda?
It's now April, we'll be getting into the concert season soon, and I know we wanted to have a lot of those issues resolved before we got into I know we We had also sent a letter saying that we were requesting that they looked into larvicides instead of adulticides for and, I mean, the letter that we received did not address that at all.
I could draft that and have it to you for your next meeting
That
for
would be good.
discussion and signature.
To put the time frame into perspective, it was in June of 2016 that Mr. DiCrescenzo visited us and explained that he had misunderstood our request regarding the proposed change to the town code that would permit us proper access to experts for complex inland wetland questions, and promised that he would get back to us quite promptly with a little bit of language, was all it needed. It was in July of 2016 that Mr. Rabbit said that he would get right after Mr. DiCrescenzo on that, and we haven't seen that yet either. And while we're on the subject, since we're talking about Simsbury Meadows, this is the first meeting of April in 2018. It was the first meeting of April of 2016 that Attorney DiCrescenzo met with us and reported that he had talked to the first selectman and Mr. Rabbit 3 weeks previously about the 7 violations we believe were outstanding at Simsbury Meadows, and undertook to schedule workshops promptly
Yes.
so that we could deal with those matters. Now, a wise acquaintance of mine said at the time that when the town says that they're going to have workshops, it means they're going to meet with you and tell you what they're willing to do, not to reason with you in any way. We haven't even had that.
Yeah.
2 years. This is the anniversary, friends. 2 full years since those promises were made. It's shameful. It is simply shameful.
What are the issues? Do we know? I mean, I don't know.
Well, we have minutes that record all the things. I encourage you to go and look at those. It is shameful. We are just not being paid attention to. These are significant concerns. We need answers. We have requested answers. And I know we have a new form of government. I don't think that's really an adequate explanation. I know there's a lot going on, but these are issues, as Don pointed out, it's taken 2 years to get. And we
Well,
were
it was-
promised workshops, we were promised information, we were promised the lawyer's response to various things, and we're just not getting really anything.
It's almost been 3 years since we did the walkthrough at Simsbury Meadows. That was July of 2015.
Yeah.
You know, we do not have effective use of legal counsel. When we try to use the town's attorney, we do not get an answer. Now, the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency has some potential recourse. We could find a motivated environmental attorney who wants to do pro bono work to represent the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency. That'd be pretty entertaining. As an alternative, the DEEP can perform our job for us if we are unable to perform it. We could ask them to do that.
I, for one, on this issue, since I'm relatively new, would like to go back and read those minutes so I understand what these issues are before we're taking kinds of extreme measures.
First meeting in
now that I'm
April,
here.
2 years ago.
Well, and even better than that, though, we had a report prepared by our staff at that time. That was before Mike, the staff went through all of the historical applications for the Simsbury Meadows related to the construction there,
And
and it was very helpful
And in
to
March-
see what was done and what was done that was permitted and what was not permitted.
And in March of 2016, I gave the commission 7 separate memoranda summarizing on a violation-by-violation basis the outstanding issues. Mike could give you those, I'm sure.
It sounds like the letter is a good idea. Another letter from the chair to the selectmen. And,
Make it firm, yes. It's makes it difficult for us to do our job. which we are required by the state to do. See, Mike Payne is here tonight. I hope to take this back to the selectmen, share our frustration with them.
I will share it. I would suggest that whatever letter you end up sending goes to the town manager as well as the first selectman, because under our new form of government, the town manager directs town staff versus
Yes.
has happened in the past with the first selectman.
So we recognize there are some new learning curves and all the rest, but any encouragement from the Board of Selectmen would be welcomed, because we're not being listened to.
Well, I think a 2-year wait for a response is
We have
not
been patient.
satisfactory.
Yeah, we have been patient. So thank you, and I will reach out to the town manager. All right, anything else on the, no, what can we do? All right, so on to item 4, Forest Management Public Discussion and Workshop. Thank you for postponing this last week. I know Chuck could not be here. I could not be here. And I understand that you, Dawn and Charles have met. They've come up with the draft letter. Has everyone had a chance to read it? Before we read it, however, I just want to say, I did have the privilege of going to a healthy forest, healthy habitat workshop a few weeks ago. It was for the Southern New England Soil and Water Conservation District. Their topic for the winter conference was all about forest management. It did have a panel of forest experts from Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. It had professors, it had foresters, it had the state foresters, and there was a lot of very interesting information. I'm going to send the links to Mike so he can send them to all of us, because these will be ongoing issues for us. And one of the things that I thought was the most interesting was that both Massachusetts and Rhode Island, in their best management plans, are a little bit more aggressive than we are in Connecticut with our forest management, best management plan documents, is that they suggest that prior to any cutting in any forest, if there are invasive plants, that those invasive plants be removed first. That kind of is interesting in regards to Onion Mountain, because we know we do have an invasive plant problem there. And the idea is that any cutting would then open the canopy to allow more invasive plants in. I know the town had a plan, in the RFP, it was sort of that the management of the invasive plants would be taken care of by the purported money that would be raised by the logging. In the discussion with the town the forester for the state of Rhode Island, who made a presentation, she was saying that, barring the removal of the invasive plants, you should actually hold off on the logging. I thought that was an interesting thing, and that was also written out in the best management plan for Massachusetts. The other thing that they have is in Massachusetts, based on a program that started in Vermont, they work with their local Audubons to determine certain bird species that you are managing the property for. They base it on the soils, they base it on the habitat, the eco-regime, and they also strongly emphasize a landscape approach to sort of the things that we were discussing at our meeting. And one of the little brochures that they did, they have identified focal birds, 17 priority forest bird species, that if you have these, they're trying to train the foresters to identify these birds. If these birds are present, you would manage your forest differently. And I thought it was a very interesting program that seems to be working very well in Massachusetts. We don't have it here, but I know I kept going on about, well, what birds are we managing it for? That is also the approach that they're using in Massachusetts. And it's quite different how they manage it for those species. So I thought, there's still a lot for us to learn. I'm going to send these links to Mike so that we can, I think it behoove us all to read up on these. They're very simple, very nicely prepared bits of information. They also said in Massachusetts that while they are trying to do this to preserve habitat for species, and that was, listed in our management plan, that, certain lands are going to be cut because the property owner wants to generate income. But in Massachusetts, they're also trying to increase the amount of closed canopy forests by quite a bit. So they strongly encourage some of the forest, and that's in a landscape context, especially lands that are adjacent to other forested lands. They try to encourage the landowner to leave those as closed canopies. So there were a lot of interesting things that came out of that meeting. I was very pleased to have gone, and I look forward to sharing this with you. I just wanted to give you a preview tonight and send those links for the next time. But let me open this up to the public before we discuss our letter. Yes, Helen.
I'd like to see everyone again. I am looking forward to your discussion on the agenda tonight, but I just want to speak to something else a little bit. About 3 weeks ago, I think you should each have received a flyer regarding the forum on the 26th. And in that flyer, there's an easy place for you to get back to me so I can register you. I did get a response from Mr. Raver, but not from any of the rest of you. A gentle reminder, since we're all going to be sharing in the responsibility of stewardship, and as caregivers, I think we need to really begin to come together with information that could be available to us. And so I am encouraging you to get back to me. Last year, we had over 85 people attending the first forum, and I'm getting some good responses. It's just that I think staff as well, Mr. Glidden.
Unfortunately, I'm on vacation that day.
Only from Todd Roy, I did hear from him. But I'm thinking that because we're in this together, I think I would like to encourage you to please let me hear from you. If you don't have that flyer anymore, raise your hand right now.
We got it tonight.
Okay,
So-
you know where to respond then, okay.
Yes. And I know I've been.
I know, but I
will be
just
coming,
need to
but
have your
I
official.
will, yes.
Thank you so much.
All right. So, on to the letter. I know we had yes, sorry.
Oh, I don't know, I mean, I don't know if other people might
No,
want to speak also.
please, yes.
So I typed up some comments, general comments to just kind of clarify some things that have come up before the commission. And first I want to say that I do appreciate the time that you've spent on this issue and the opportunity that you've given for the public to speak at these meetings. And you don't normally have public audience, so I do appreciate that. And I also, I know that you already voted to move forward 4-2, and I just want to outline a few reasons why I disagree with this decision. And I want to make it clear that all of my comments are directed at the commission as a whole, and some comments are also directed to town staff. So one comment I wanted to address was Commissioner Paulaitis mentioned that she was doing a narrow reading based on her legal background of the decision before you. And I just wanted to say that I think that the commission holds two very different hats, the regulatory role and the conservation role. And I think in the regulatory role, a narrow reading is very appropriate because you're looking at regulations and legal issues. In the conservation role, I would just encourage you to take a broader, kind of long-term and more expansive view when you're tasked with conservation issues. And I would also disagree that there are really no bad decisions because I think that there are suboptimal decisions that can be made regarding the public trust, particularly if all the relevant information isn't taken into account. So I wanted to clarify a couple of things. First, it's been sort of portrayed that there are two sides on this issue, and I think that's really a misrepresentation of where people are on this in terms of the comments and the public testimony. I think we all want to do the right thing, but we differ on the details. And this idea that there are two sides is suggesting that people don't want to touch any trees or have any management. That's never been our position. What we're saying is town-owned forests are the only forests that we can protect. The state is harvesting all of their forests, private individuals can do what they want. None of the people here, to my knowledge, complained about any of the state logging or any of the private logging. We're specifically coming to you about our town forests. And if we want to have a balanced landscape, and if we want to have a variety of management styles, our town forests are the only forests that we can leave as intact ecosystems and sort of shepherd those and guarantee that. That is the most rare ecosystem. It is a native New England ecosystem. It requires no management except for public health and safety, and it's our rarest habitat. That's why I've been advocating for it. I haven't complained at all about any other logging jobs. You can ask the state. I'm friends with the forester who's about to harvest Masako. His name is Fran. And I don't know his last name, but it's Italian. Also, the intended use of our forests is conservation and recreation. Because of that, that's why I think we need an ecologist to look at our forests. Conservation is an important issue. Recreation would have to be compatible with conservation. That should be a fundamental principle if that's the goal based on the deeds. The other thing about our old forests, they have the most carbon, they have high biodiversity, and we have 22,000 acres in town. We're talking about a tiny fraction of our landscape. I'm only going to share the highlights of this. So, you know, it's also come up that people have said that the town has nefarious motives, or that people have, you know, disparaged the reputation of the forester. I have not seen this. I have not heard people say either of those things. And we've said publicly that the town had good intentions. We've said publicly that we thought the forester was a good forester. I called about his reputation because I didn't know anything about this. I called as many people as I could to find out what was going on. I submitted this in writing that he was a reputable forester, and he did the job that we asked him to do. It's on the town to do a better job going forward with what we ask people to do with our property. There's also been a comment that an old growth forest designation would tie the town's hands or link us to an outside organization. I tried to make that clear in my comments in writing and in public audience that neither of those are true. So I won't go into that any further. I've also brought to the commission letters from several experts, Eric Hammerling, Joan Maloof, and Robert Leverett. Several times these experts have been called into question and they were determined to not be experts. I'm not sure what that is based on. I don't think it's Dr. Maloof, and I don't think it's Eric Hammerling, who's probably known to several members of the commission. I suspect it might either be Robert Leverett or it might be me. I'm a biomedical scientist. I haven't portrayed myself as a forester. I actually brought my CV in case you'd like to look at it. But I'd like to also say that when I present information to the commission, I'm applying my research background to the quality of the information that I'm bringing to them. The experts that I contacted by calling people like Eric Hammerling, like people I know are leaders in the state. These are the people that I contacted based on calling other leaders. And to just give you a little overview of Mr. Leverett's CV, I'm providing that as well. And if it's someone else whose information is being dismissed, I'm not sure who that is. So I think it's because I provided an informal email that I received from him in the spirit of being honest and transparent with the open-ended question that I asked him and the response that I got. It wasn't a research paper that I was presenting, it was an email. And I regret that I made him seem not credible because of that. It was in the interest of being honest and transparent. In full disclosure, I've known Eric Hammerling for a number of years based on his work, at FRWA. I had no prior interaction with any of the other experts, and I have no personal or financial relationship with any of the experts. I'd like to address some baffling statements that were made by the commission that unless we proceed with logging, there will be a loss of growth that was facilitated by previous harvests. That's not true. The growth could be slowed, but it's not going to be lost if the forest is left alone. Even if the canopy does close, it will be temporary. Trees that grow slower are stronger and more resistant to pests. And the goal for these properties is not growing trees. Furthermore, gap dynamics develop in the canopy at 125 years, and this was reflected in the peer review that was up to 9 pages, I believe, written by Ed Faison, that what you're trying to do with this project will happen naturally in the forest. As a profession, foresters promote faster growth because they are trying to harvest trees in successive harvests. That is a goal. They're also trying to perhaps create successional habitats which supports certain types of wildlife. I'm not against that. They might want to promote specific aesthetics. I'm not against that. But without question, logging improves the habitat for some species and damages it for others. It's also been said that the public is not that interested in this issue. That is not true. We've just been patient and respectful and did not want to overwhelm your meetings. Most people don't even know about it. The people that do know about it have been tracking this issue very carefully. The Onion Mountain Plan can be approved now, but the others are in more of a draft form. Other than the trees that are spray painted, I don't know what the evidence is that this is a draft, that the others are a draft and this is a final form. They're virtually identical. This is for the health of the forest. Since there's no one definition of forest health and the forest is not sick, this is virtually meaningless. I will not go into additional issues about that, but that could be a long discussion. So I'd like to also say, why I think this was a bad decision. The Commission has consistently discussed that it's essential to log our forest to yield money for projects in the forest. My understanding is that money is not the purview of the Commission. If it was, I would hope that you would have gotten additional information on how much money we were actually going to be receiving. And based on my calculations, which I submitted and probably is in your electronic packet, this is an amount that could easily be achieved by other means. Other town commissions and elected officials have said repeatedly that we are not logging our public forests for money, which is good because it's not their purpose in the deed and it's not much money. But a goal of the RFP was money. Each forest is supposed to yield enough money to pay for the plan to harvest that forest. This is an error of first principles in this process. Furthermore, no one ever looked at the deeds to determine if logging is even allowed, what the properties were conserved for, prior to paying a forester to make these plans. No one has ever pulled together the basic ecological environmental information about the properties, and there's a lot of information on some properties. We've been asking for this consistently for 2 years, including in writing in May 2016, multiple times thereafter, in person and in writing. Some of the reasons why these forests shouldn't be logged is Belden is old, it's a unique oasis in the center of town, it offers value just in silence and mental health, it's a candidate for the old growth forest network, and we were told previously by the Yale School of Forestry to never cut it, but it's because it's such a gem. This is 30 years we were told that, but now we have a logging plan that's identical to the one for Onion Mountain. If you follow the same plan, you would come to the same conclusion to log Belden Forest. The Ethel Walker Woods is a core forest with some very old areas, many diverse habitats, high biodiversity, rare species, very complicated deed restrictions that say you can't even move dead logs out of the forest. And there was a lot of information collected by various agencies and experts. Onion Mountain is a trap rock ridge, which is an imperiled habitat in Connecticut and is a major east-west wildlife corridor. This has been inadequately considered. We did not even follow the basic advice of the forester himself before approving it the first time, where he said we need to query the natural diversity database, deal with invasives, and contact adjacent property owners. So you're reactivating this based on the fact it was already approved. Before it was approved the first time in 2015, it's clear to me that no one had ever read the plan. So I'd like to also address one other issue, is that I believe that town staff intervened inappropriately at the last meeting. If you have any doubts about this, I encourage you to watch the recording on SCTV. The commission was moving towards sending a letter to get this off of their agenda, saying it was complex, they wanted more public input, and essentially they were under you guys were under no pressure to do anything, to deliver any decision, to deliver any type of decision, and town staff interrupted and really pushed the commission toward a vote. And if you want to check this out for yourself, I was watching this on TV at home. I told my team to get home, and that's why I drove here to Town Hall at 9 o'clock at night. The relevant part starts at about 45 minutes. Town staff intervenes at about an hour, and I appear at about an hour, 45 minutes into the meeting and try and bring up several issues, the economic issues, the wildlife corridor, the peer review, etc. So in sum, we know that forests can manage themselves, they self-fertilize, intact forests are more resistant to fire and disease. We don't know if continued management is actually sustainable. We've only been doing it since, maybe 100 years or so. It involves removing material and damaging the forest floor. If we want to experience the grand forest that used to exist in New England, we have to leave some places alone. So I'm not asking you to revisit your vote because I know that's probably not going to happen. I am requesting that you include in the letter to the selectmen 2 points. Logging will be no more than 6 days per week because people do have the right to enjoy their property and the state will be logging extensively on an even bigger parcel across the street. That the plan for Onion Mountain be considered alongside the open space management plan before proceeding, and that the letter reflect that all of the public input has been not in favor of proceeding with this, as well as support from expert letters. And so I appreciate you giving me the time to share these thoughts and appreciate your consideration in this issue.
Thank you very much, Susan. So how would we like to proceed?
Well, I would think maybe we could get all the comments out and then.
Are there any other additional comments? Thank you, Diane.
I usually don't attend these meetings because my hearing is so bad that this particular room makes it worse, even with these additional devices. So I watch it at home. And I'm astounded by the interaction, and Susan Vecino just mentioned a particular night that she's discussing. I would urge you to watch all of them that have been recorded for the sections about the forest. Because as it evolved, you constantly hear, we don't know about forests. That's not our area of expertise. Where we have government regulation, where we are a regulatory body, and I hear Don's frustration about the things that I as a citizen see that you folks have said this is in violation, and they continue, and yet you're sending a recommendation on something that the public paid huge amounts of money to buy these forest land. And many of us, not only our tax money, I'm talking particularly about the Ethel Walker Woods, we spent another $4 million privately we kicked in to preserve a forest. And if any of you think we're going to make money from that, you got to check the deed, because none of the logging is going to go to the town. If any logging is done, it's going to go to Ethel Walker School. And that was put in there as a protection, so someone wouldn't say, we got 425 acres, we may want to chop up. So I would go back to the beginning when you all said, this is on our plate. Why is this on our plate? We're not forest experts. And so trying to get up to speed brings you to a conclusion. We got an RFP out here that we as the public at open space and at selectmen's meeting were told it really doesn't mean anything. Nothing is going to happen. I'd urge you to go back to the open space meetings and read those, listen to those tapes too. Because we were told repeatedly, it's just to give us some parameters. And then you look at, you have an RFP, and there's no reason not to go forward. Legally, the parameters have been met. So Susan talks about, we all agreed we wanted to preserve this land. We all agreed we need a whole plan to look at all the forest and to sort of say, well, Onion Mountain's only one. So sacrifice this and not look at how it connects to everything else. So, though Susan says you're probably not going to change your vote, I would hope you would. And I'm just a plain old citizen that's been in town 50 years and would hope that this commission, that's a conservation commission, would first and foremost try to conserve our forests.
Thank you, Diane.
Do I get a little excited?
For both of you.
I hate all this deforestation on the 10 there, building everywhere. Where's the beautiful farms and the flowers and wildflowers and all that? They call it progress, I guess.
Any other comments about the forestry management plan? Thank you, I think the point's well taken. You two had the hand in writing this letter. Do you want to present it?
Has the public seen the letter yet?
I don't know. Have you seen the letter that was the draft letter? And I would like input from the public on this.
So I guess the question.
Originally, we were going to write a letter saying that we had concerns that we wanted to share with the selectmen. I mean, I do agree with comments that have been made that, you know, that the vote was premature, that we know it was, because we had a plan, there was a feeling that we had to vote on it. I know we had many weeks, it was annoying, we met, you know, discussed this ad nauseum, but I do hope the letter does reflect all of our concerns.
Right, so let me take it in a couple steps. So it seems to me the first step is from the board side, does the letter reflect the sort of agreement that we made, which was that when the last time we met, it kind of became clear that we were sort of at an impasse, and that we would write a letter to the Board of Selectmen representing where we were. And so I would say that we should talk about whether this letter as drafted succeeds in that, and then whatever changes we want to make to that, given some of the comments we've heard or whatever, then we should talk about it with the public as well. Yeah, I don't know if that means presenting it or whatever, but I think we should kind of have to do it in something like that order. Does that make sense, or are you thinking about something different? I mean, so Dawn and I sat together, I think.
And first off, I want to thank you two for sitting together and writing this.
And we actually tried in the process to make sure that sort of both the parts of it were represented, and then we actually went through a process of thinking to ourselves, how would everybody else on the committee think about this? You know, as we actually went through it. I think it does reflect, you know, what we were trying to do last meeting. You know, if people don't have a comment on it, I can explain a little bit what's in the letter to people, and then go forward, or Don can. I guess I'm still looking for, have we achieved what our goal was?
I would just add that the letter can be thought of in two parts. The first two paragraphs really embody the substance of the motion that was made and carried at the last meeting that dealt with this, about the specific recommendation on Onion Mountain. The balance of the letter tries to capture the kind of conundrum that we've dealt with, being unable to reach fundamental agreement on the myriad issues involved here. Whether we need a philosophy, what the philosophy should be, how much management is appropriate, or is maybe no management other than and the minimal essential management appropriate, basically confessing that we were not able to resolve these issues and suggesting to the board that at the very least, greater public involvement in the issue needs to be mustered, and that perhaps the open space master plan, which is contemplated, is the forum for doing that.
I think the second part said that as part of the intention that, while as part of the process, we didn't see a problem, well, I mean, we see that if they are going to try to do more things with more parts of the forest, they're going to have more of these problems. And that probably needs to be dealt with. And so I think in the letter, we tried to discuss that. And we felt the issue that we were not in a position to deal with the detailed tactics of how to achieve the different goals. We didn't have the right public involvement, and it was going to be a bigger process. So I think we have achieved what the letter tried to do. And I guess I would look for the people who did not write it to say, whether they think we did it or they want to send us back to try it again.
I actually think that this last penultimate paragraph is quite good in suggesting that, that this, while we didn't, while we approved the Onion Mountain, there's an active debate about what the best conservation plan is and the best way to deal with Simsbury's forests in general are, and that may require and would behoove the town to consider that.
And again, it does beg the question that I brought up last time, why is Onion Mountain any different? Why aren't we including that in the discussion? Why are we going ahead with Onion Mountain when we haven't had that discussion in the first place?
Right, but that's how we split.
Right, because I think enough of us felt comfortable enough with the plan for Onion Mountain to move forward with the plan for Onion Mountain at this moment.
True, and I do agree that there was, I do think that there was some staff influence on that one, because this is not an application before us, there was no urgency for that. It is unusual for staff to intervene in that regards, and so, there was that.
I must say, you may have perceived me as somebody who is not reluctant to criticize staff, but I must say, I didn't think we were put under any pressure by Mr. Rabbit.
No, I think it was
at that
encouragement.
meeting.
I think it was not pressure, it was encouragement. Because we had a plan before us, there was no reason. I saw it as, we had a plan before us, there was absolutely no reason not to vote for it. Whereas some of us were saying, we have a plan before us, but we want to step back and look at the total picture. I do like the second part of the letter. The first part, I would like to include some caveats, because this is a consensus letter. I know we've had this discussion before. It's not, I'm sending my name to it. I want it to be a consensus letter. We are all appointed to bring our own expertise to the group. I want it to be reflected that there was, it says recommends the implementation. I'd say recommend with some concerns or
How about a non-unanimous recommendation?
Yes.
I mean, typically we
yes.
do things unanimously.
Yes.
And if you just say that, it just
Yes.
just goes.
Yes, but that there were some legitimate concerns raised about, some of the tactics, the strategies.
I think it's
for it.
I think that's all in the back. I think that's
It
all
is
in the
in the
back.
back. It is in the back, yeah.
So, so if you just put into that front part a non-unanimous,
That would help.
then that solves that one problem. Unless, do you want to go into a lot more detail in the top part of this thing?
Well, I was just thinking, saying with concern, with specific concerns and qualifications. We do have concerns. We are spelling out that we want, we are qualifying what we want. I don't think it would hurt the letter to say with with some, with concerns.
Do you want to
We
enumerate them?
we don't have specific concerns in the letter, though.
I would suggest that we.
Well, the concerns are that we wanted to, take it before the public, we wanted to do those things, the things that we want to do for all the other town properties.
What about an
What are
and?
different?
If we said we recommend the implementation, and we also recommend these considerations that you take into account,
That would
these
be
considerations. that are outlined which are here in the third paragraph, but that you highlight that
That would
they
be-
are as important
I
as
think it
the
should
first
be in the
one.
first paragraph, otherwise it sounds awful clear cut that we are going, which is just
Well, I think
fine
the more
with-
important part is that we approve this plan because enough of us are comfortable enough with it, but enough of us also think that the town should move forward with considering an overall forestry management plan, or this is gonna continue to bog us down in another 18 months of time looking at
I
things
don't
that
think the time is really the issue. I don't think that's the issue. I think the thing is because all we're doing is sending this letter, and we're saying that the town needs to consider, there are a lot of different things. I mean, I know, just by going to, one day of, forest management plan and listening to other experts talk about it, it's like, oh my gosh, there are different ways that we could be logging this piece of wood depending on which species of birds were actually, and I know I brought that up many times.
So I'm unclear, can you tell me what the changes you'd like to make to the?
I
first
just wanted
paragraph?
that first, that with qualifications, we are, I just don't want it to sound, yes, we're going ahead. Yes, it was a split vote, that's fine, but I think, we are trying to say that these are complicated issues. Just because, we had a plan, we voted on it, but we're really not 100%, this group as a whole is not 100% behind that.
Do you want to say recommends by a vote of 4-2?
No, I want to say with some concerns. You had concerns about
but-
soil management, the soil erosion. I mean, you've put in about skids and, there's some very specific things here you put in.
I'm just having trouble, Marty, with figuring out what language you're suggesting.
I'd like, with reservations. We have reservations about this plan.
I think, so, I would suggest that you think about what you actually want the commission to do with this. And what we are saying, so I know you don't want them to go forward, but I think, so the best outcome would be is if they actually task force or commission to
That's
come
what I
up
was
with
hoping for, yes.
right, that you're
Yes.
hoping for. So, I think a more practical approach and way to do it and say, rather than say we approve this, but we kind of don't, is to maybe say that we've approved this because enough of us are comfortable enough with this plan as is to go forward with this. However, we recommend the following considerations when approving forestry management plans and considering them in the first, that may or may not have been taken into account when this particular forestry management plan was put into place, and highlight this as in the third paragraph of what we actually want considered, so that
Well, that's
when this
why-
comes up again and done, the commission actually has specifics of what they're supposed to be looking at, as opposed to just a sort of, we had reservations, we're not sure what we don't, some of us didn't like this, some of us didn't like that. The more broad topics that need to be addressed, that we would like to see addressed going forward in any forestry management plan, so that the commission actually has specifics to sort of hang their hat on and grab onto and to sink their teeth into. I think we are more likely to get some action going forward on that topic.
Susan?
I'm thinking that if you want to highlight up front the discussion and all that, you should probably just put the third paragraph first and all the, things, and at the end, make it the last, penultimate paragraph. Conservation Commission recommends with a non-unanimous vote and with some reservations, the implementation, and just, then you don't have to do a lot of wordsmithing, but changing the order of the content changes the importance of what you put first.
It works for me.
Originally, the charge was to have it in this order, so.
What charge?
Well, when we basically said that we were going to, and I'm fine with the mods. I just remember that when we basically went back and said we're gonna write the letter, it was gonna be in this format, what our recommendation was gonna be, and then
Well,
some
it's
of the
all
rest.
in here, but I
Yeah.
think, yeah.
I'm not sure I understand the purpose of turning it upside down.
I think when you read a letter, you don't bury the lead. I think one of the leads here is, yes, we are recommending it, but we have concerns. I mean, this is not everyone was fine with it, let's go ahead, just, start up, the machinery. I think we had, from all of our discussion, and it was a split vote, that, if we didn't have a split vote, I think the order's fine. But we do have a split vote, and I'd like to have this as a consensus document, and if it doesn't matter, does it matter to you if it's in the other order?
Well, if you're talking about burying the lead, I think, in a sense, the lead was, the commission approved, that the unambiguous thing that was approved was the Onion Mountain Plan. Not unanimously, but it was unambiguously approved. And the important softer issues are, I think, adequately spelled out below, but I think there is an unambiguous message that you're trying to send to the Board of Selectmen that 4-2, the commission thought that this plan should go forward, but that we are concerned that there are lots of big questions and there's a need for a much bigger public discussion of those.
Again, I don't want to reflect it in but it does beg the question, how did we get so happy about approving this one when we had such big questions about all the rest of them?
Because I don't think any of us had that big enough questions to not allow it to go through. I mean, 4 of us felt comfortable enough with it for this plan to go through, at the end of the day. Yet, do we have considerations about whether we want to designate all towns in Simsbury, all forests in Simsbury as old-growth forests? That's, to me, is...
That was not the consideration, and that's conflating, I think, issues. What we had was how to look on a landscape basis, to look at our landscape, look at our forests, and then go forward with that.
So
Yep.
I'm sorry,
Sorry.
you keep going.
No, I was just going to...
I know public audience is over, but.
Well,
I'm
we don't
just-
really, it's a workshop, so
It's
it doesn't
workshop.
follow the same
Okay.
rules.
Maybe you each have to read this cold, because I just read it. It says, we think we ought to approve this plan. Then the next paragraph says, and I hate when it says we're gonna have a problem with residents, because I don't consider myself a problem. After tonight, you may, but I don't consider myself a problem when I'm trying to do something that is in the public best interest.
I'm sorry, did we say we're gonna have a problem with residents someplace?
No, the discussion was, we're gonna have a problem with public input on what we wanna do with our forest. It was said right here.
Nice.
Just now.
Not in the letter, tonight.
So-
Oh, okay, I'm
Just
sorry,
here.
I'm sorry.
We're gonna have this problem, and it's gonna come up.
Well, it does say, absent such a broad public
But
discussion,
if you-
consideration of
what I'm
subsequent forest
suggesting to
activity could be
you
mired in
is-
controversy.
The way you phrase this, to read it cold, it says, we voted to approve. Then it says, all of the ambiguous discussion, you have the problems. So then I go back to paragraph number 1, and I said, then why are they approving this forest when we're saying we really ought to study all the other ones? Simply because a plan was put forth in 2015, and probably has to go back to the drawing board anyway. You're saying, here are all the reservations we have about it.
So I can answer some of this. So if you actually go back to what was happening on last meeting, I was the one that recommended that we put it to a vote, because I had come to the belief that in this body, we're not gonna add any more information. That we had a lot of public input, and that given the state that we were in, there wasn't anything that was gonna change here. And that the best place to have this discussion is in another forum. So, so I recommended that we actually try to close on this to get to that point where we can have that better discussion. After a lot of time, this is where you've ended up in terms of how things are being discussed. Nothing that was gonna change, at least in my perspective, nothing was gonna change that outcome at this point in time. So I think that, the letter has tried to capture that and has tried to help encourage us to take a look at it as a town. But this is a body that cannot get into the tactics. We haven't been able to do that. There's a lot more detail needs to go into it. So I think that's why it's organized this way. And we kind of agreed, before we actually took the vote, as to how the letter was going to be formatted, so we tried to write it that direction. I would say that if we, as a group, if we want to change the order of this to make it a little bit more point, that's fine. But I do think the best bet for us to move all this forward is to go into a different body.
I totally agree. I was recommending that, and what I was also recommending was that we write a letter to the Board of Selectmen to say, this is a really difficult issue that few people here should not be deciding on our own. And without saying, yes, we have to go ahead with, the vote on the plan was the part that I had the problem with, not the writing of the letter. I do have, moving on to another part of the letter, on the last paragraph, on a separate but important issue, it would be beneficial that the cash proceeds from the timber sales be approved and sequestered in such a way they could be applied solely to the forest stewardship. I do recall we had discussions to say that we should be suggesting that the town have a discussion to see whether or not there are other ways of funding the forest management other than the sale of timber, that we don't manage our other properties expecting them to pay for themselves. Why do we do this only for timber management? And then when reading the forest management plan for Onion Mountain, it says we should be doing the invasive plant removal first. Now, the idea was we would generate money from the removal of the trees to get the money to do the invasive planting, but in the Onion Mountain plan, it says we need to remove the invasive plants first. So we're not even following the plan. And we're suggesting that, the town, set aside the money to do the work that we need. So there is a discussion. We need to have a discussion of where the money's going to come from to follow the plan, to do the invasive plant removal first. And that if we haven't done that, we really don't move ahead with the forest management plan, which is best management practice in our adjoining states who have much more aggressive best management plans, and it sees no reason for us not to follow that practice as well. So, it would be nice not to say just put in a separate fund and we'll sequester it. Let's we should be having a bigger discussion of why we expect these properties to pay for, to fund themselves. We don't expect soccer fields to fund themselves by running them as sod farms. Why should we expect our forests to fund themselves by chopping down the trees of the very forests that we're trying to, we have conservation deeds on? So, there are a lot of things that we discussed. So that paragraph, I think, needs a lot of work.
Well, let's dice this up a little bit. I think, Mike, you'll correct me if I have this wrong, I think the Board of Selectmen apportioned some money to pay for the logging work to be done. There's front-end money, is there not?
Mike, do you have information on that?
You're talking Mike,
Mike,
sorry.
yeah, sorry, yeah.
Sorry.
It's all right, I'll get to you next time.
I would suggest that this board recommend things, but it's really the Board of Selectmen's job how to pay for stuff, ultimately what to do.
Absolutely.
I want your input, but frankly, whether we do things 1, 2, 3 or 2, 3, 1, that is ultimately our decision. You can recommend certain things, and I think the more recommendations or concerns you put in here, be as specific as you can agree to.
All right, well then I would recommend that we add to the letter that we follow the recommendations of the management plan to do the removal of the invasive plant, and that the Board of Selectmen determine how we will be paying for that, since it won't be through the sale of timber for that particular property.
I don't even think that's the issue. Whether we say we're going to pay $1 to do this, whether we take it out of our right pocket to do this job first, to then get reimbursed, that is not, with all due respect, this commission's job.
Right.
That's our job.
Okay.
Whether we're doing it good or not, that's a different discussion.
All right. Well, yes.
I will mirror that a little bit. I think in all the conversations that I've been fortunate to have with you, I said you wore 2 hats, and that the money is, you go through that door, you come in that door, you sit here, and you talk to the Board of Selectmen, and you can speak to your issue as a citizen to that subject. But while you're in here wearing this hat, that it didn't jive. But what I was going to say also was, I think I've tried to always bring this up into the discussion because it sort of can take away some of the frustration that we're all feeling. I've been dealing with this for 20 years as a policymaker, as a caretaker, but in those 20 years, I've learned so much, and things have changed. And I tried to draw that out to you about the magic year of 2014, when all of this took place, and that particular plan was approved. And I tried to draw you a picture to say what I had learned and wanted to share with you, that was past practice, not bad practice. It was past practice. This was what people did with their forests, whether they were private, state, community, municipal, whatever. This was past practice in forestry. But I had learned that in all the 40 to 50 years prior to 2014, nothing had happened to change that past practice. However, we've been blessed. We have so many young people, so many scientists that have come to the fore in our colleges and our universities and our research places that have brought us new information. That new information is what should help us formulate new best practices. You can't rely on past practice, but I have to say, Dr. Faison, who was here at our forum last year, taught me that. He said, Helen, you've got to be patient. I said, me, patient? I said, I'm 84 years old. You can't ask me to be patient, but I'm trying to be very patient. And then he said, you've got to understand that we're in this cusp. We are in transition, going from that practice, trying to find a way to better new practice based on scientific conservation science, not on emotional, love the woods, whatever. This is supposed to be a scientific approach. And now we are blessed to have the natural scientists that we didn't have before. But because we are now thinking about climate change, most of us have turned our attention before climate change scare, but our attention was turned to our natural resources over the years. But we have to really step back, put the knowledge in front of us, and then begin to make the conservation decisions that we need to make. And that's what I wanted to leave with you. In other words, yes, we're in that transition time, and we have to come together, and then we can have, let's say, a debate after we have the information. But as caretakers, are we prepared? And that's what I've been after the last number of years, is that as a caretaker, you have to be prepared. All of us. You have to do the reading, you have to talk to the experts, you have to listen to the experts. We bring you information, not based on my knowledge. We bring you information based on experts. But then we have to put it together. That's our job. So thank you again for listening.
Well, just to emphasize what you were saying about the science is changing, from my, in Massachusetts, they are, the foresters are teaming up. There's the foresters for the birds. It's a training program for the foresters to be able to identify where birds are in which birds are in which habitat. When they find those bird species, they do cutting in quite a different way. There's a different strategy for the cutting. That's new. That's something they've only been doing for a few years in Massachusetts. It'll probably be coming here. It is new science that we really, I didn't really know that much about.
Well, but in all of our discussions, we knew that there was a lot of stuff out there. There was a lot of different discussion about the tactics, and in the end, none of that was changing the feeling of this commission as a group, and so we're in sort of the wrong place to be having that discussion.
Absolutely, but what I'm saying is that even if you just looked at this little book that's put out by, you would get the feeling that there are many options that we have that are not discussed in our management plan.
Absolutely.
And
But
so-
we knew that about a year ago.
We did, but we've come, we're coming along, and it does beg the question, does a plan that was written, that, those many years ago, is it still adequate for the town's needs?
Like a work in
I think we,
progress.
but I think we voted, and enough of us
Yes, I
felt
know
that
we
it is.
voted,
So-
and so we move ahead,
So we move-
and
so
we do
now
a
we're on to
letter.
the letter.
But that's why I think it's important to reflect in the letter that we do have, concerns that we're the body that's deciding this, and that,
We're the body making a recommendation
Recommendation.
back to the selectmen,
Yes.
who can take the entire letter
That would be
and
good.
toss it.
that would be good.
And so the question I have is, the mission is to get this letter out. I agree with that, because we're not focusing our energy here appropriately. We should be helping to focus it in other places. So the question is, what do we do about the letter now?
You could say, in light of new information, it's a work in progress, nothing is set in stone.
Well,
We've already voted, it's, I mean, the Onion Mountain
But
Plan
I'm
is
saying you
kind
have
of
to
approved.
qualify the opinion for future, so nobody says, well, listen, you did it for this one, why not for that one?
But I think that's what the letter is trying to do.
Well, I think the letter goes to the selectmen. I'm hoping that the selectmen will take it with the idea that there are a great deal of concerns about it, not only from members of the commission, some support, some don't, and that the public has raised some very interesting concerns, and that they will take it out of our hands and put it into a more knowledgeable body who will really take time, that even though this has been approved, that they will look at it and say, yes, it's been approved, but we need to look at it in the landscape context.
So how would you like to change the letter?
Well, I'd just like to say that, the last paragraph I think is a little too specific. I would like to say that we need to look at our funding options for managing our lands, rather than saying, and that, if there is any revenue, it would be put into a thing. But I think
Take out the last paragraph altogether.
that would be
Yes.
fine.
We can
Because
definitely
I think
take it out.
it makes it too cut and dry that we're just gonna fund these things by that. That would be good.
I don't think there's any problem with that. I think that was actually an attempt to make sure that any revenue didn't go into the general fund.
That's how I took it.
But I think it goes to a bigger, broader discussion.
You're absolutely.
No, that's
And
fine.
I may say that
Sorry,
we
Mike.
sort of had you in mind when we added the paragraph.
Thank you,
We
but
just- we
it
didn't-
wasn't enough.
Okay, so
All right,
it's out.
thank you for the attempt. All right.
Okay. How about the rest of the letter?
May I say that the Board of Selectmen has already
No, that we-
registered the fact that it was a 4-2 vote.
Yes.
That's in the record of the last Board of Selectmen
Yes, it
meeting.
is.
So they'll be under no illusions about unanimity.
Yeah, so the only reason I would say to change that, or to put a couple of words in, is if you want to make a calling to the bottom. The question is whether we really want to switch the order, or we just want to leave it as is. We originally stated, when we set up the letter, how we're going to do the letter, that we basically say the recommendation up front, then put in the other pieces behind it. That's the reason it has this particular form. But if enough people say, well, because of the issues, we want to switch the order, that could easily be an edit, I think, without much of an issue. We could easily do that. The question is whether, the people that wanted to have the recommendation sort of up front, whether that makes sense.
They already know that part, as you said. They already know that we approved it.
I mean,
I think
So
you
the
could
lead
say
really-
that the Conservation Commission recommends the implementation of the management plan, and also the certain considerations which we have outlined in their when considering ongoing forestry management.
That would be better than be resumed. I like that better. Since they already know, I don't think it's going to come as a surprise that the letter says, we've approved it. I'd like what going forward is that they really need to study these things more.
So Jill, can you say that again?
So, I have to remember what I said. So the Conservation Commission recommends the implementation of the management plan for Onion Mountain Park, which would be resumed, and it's going to have to wordsmith it here, but basically an and somewhere in there, and as well as certain considerations, or certain concerns which should be considered or should be accounted for when considering ongoing forestry management plans,
As outlined below.
as outlined below.
I think that should be stated right up front, so thank you.
I'm
So it's a
trying
first
to
part
get
is
specific
the,
about the words,
All right.
forgive me.
All right, good.
I'm trying not to say considering 3 times, is why I'm,
All right.
I'm
Let's-
arguing this.
Where specifically is this
So,
going? Before several? No.
Yes, before several. Be resumed. Although I don't know if the sentence gets kind of run on with the clause in the.
How about if that thought gets put towards the bottom of that paragraph where we're talking about the high level of public interest?
So all I was thinking is that we have sort of 2 purposes to this letter. There has been that that the commission, this is how we got to where we are. There is the approval of Onion Mountain. And secondly, we also have certain considerations that we would like taken into account when they are considering forestry management plans going forward, or that we would like them to think about and address. So
Maybe it's just
sort
a
of-
second sentence.
It's either a second sentence or a clause 1 and a clause 2. And then and then the rest,
But
so
we
it just
don't-
highlights that down in the bottom, we also have concerns that should be
Yeah.
considered going
But
forward.
we don't have, in fact, specific considerations we want them to think about. I mean, it's the absence of those kinds of specific considerations that is, part of what's going on in the second half of the letter.
I think we've already asked the forester to completely, remark the trees and look at these things and use some different things. So we do have some specific concerns.
Or, then you say, or a broad, we also recommend.
And we do have concerns from a landscape scale, what we're doing with our forests, so, yes.
Well, I know there's been a lot of comments about having an ecologist. Maybe you could recommend that the Board of Selectmen have an
That's-
ecologist come out before proceeding. I mean, that's really,
And that was a big discussion during our
I think all we want is, that's more of this selectmen of what's going forward, is that we've approved Onion Mountain and we want them to think about certain things think about a forestry plan, considering forestry planning in the future with certain considerations. So if you highlight the way,
Does going forward mean after Onion Mountain or going forward, including going forward on Onion Mountain?
I think the last paragraph is encouraging them to think about these problems before they before they go forward on Onion Mountain.
On Onion Mountain?
Yeah.
Because
But on the face of it,
I would be happy if we could put that phrase in, that,
I don't think we can say we approve Onion Mountain, but then you have to have a forestry map. I mean, we approved Onion Mountain.
yeah, I think the difference is that, the board, for what it saw from the Onion Mountain plan, the majority of the board thought that was good enough as written to proceed. And that, but we took all of the stuff that we've had concerns about and we put it in the back here. And we're making a recommendation that the selectmen, think about these things. And, they can draw the conclusion, as they could without a letter, to just go ahead with Onion Mountain, or to ditch the Onion Mountain thing and just do this bottom part. We gave them suggestions on how to move forward with the open space master plan. We basically put into it the things that we needed, a lot of good public comment, et cetera, and that. Those recommendations are in there, as to how to get out of this particular kind of bind. But I think, right now, there isn't any way, either this board, the majority of this board felt that there was nothing keeping this plan from moving forward as it was now.
Or you could, so for that second clause, you could say something along the lines of, for the and engage in a broader discussion and further consideration of a broader forestry management plan. Something like that.
I'm still having trouble figuring out where this is going and what exact words.
I don't know what it's hard for me to wordsmith without typing.
I think you want it at the end of the first sentence, and it should read, and that consideration be given to
A broader forest
A
management.
broader forest
broader
management.
stewardship goals.
A broader forest management plan. Yeah, broader stewardship goes, yeah. That's relatively tight, and then we talk about what that is at the bottom.
that would be good. I'd like to see that in the first sentence.
That
So-
wasn't
so-
the first
That
sentence,
is, yes, that's right.
So the question is, can we put it in the first sentence right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think, Don, do you want me to try to write it down, or do you want to try to write it down?
Okay.
Jim's got it.
Okay, Jim's got it.
I have a
question. Like, let's say you voted for something 3 years ago, but in light of new research and new findings, you know, now you sort of say, well, we qualify our original vote based on this new information. Are you allowed to do that? or
Well, we
not?
voted last week, this wasn't
Oh,
3
last
weeks.
week.
Sorry.
So the answer to your question is, after a lot of this discussion, this is where this commission ended up with. And there wasn't anything that was changing that particular view after those times. So we've heard a lot of this stuff. So it's not that, I think in our end, we've tried to answer these things and make sure we've heard what people have said.
And that consideration be given to broader. Consideration be given. All right, what Jim has written is after, in the third line, after be resumed, he's written, and that consideration be given to broader town forest stewardship goals. I would think you could strengthen that a little bit. Not just the consideration be given, but that the town should work on.
Should pursue
Consensus, pursue broad public consensus on broader forest stewardship goals.
Sounds great.
Is that better, that's a little stronger than?
Yes.
That's better.
Yes.
Okay, and that the town pursue a broad public consensus on its forest stewardship goals.
Great.
All right? So first sentence reads, "The Conservation Commission recommends that implementation of the management plan for Onion Mountain Park, which the selectmen approved in 2015 but was interrupted by a problem with the logging contract, be resumed, and that the town pursue a broad public consensus on its forest stewardship goals."
I like it.
That's better.
How's that?
I would accept that.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, John.
Can I ask a quick question about this? When would the logging start? And would it interfere with would they take in consideration the early spring birds who are laying eggs and such? That would be my concern about the animals that are going to be interrupted and their
One of the suggestions, yeah, so usually those things are handled, but one of the things we have in the front, at the bottom of the front paragraph is that we say, having observed a high level of public interest in this plan, we would suggest that the forester be asked to make a public presentation of its features, and we'd be happy to host such a session. So I think, you know, while again, we have very little control over what the selectmen do, this is a way to encourage that discussion moving forward.
But I may say that if my experience with Eric Hansen and people he has worked with suggests that they would be very mindful indeed
Yeah.
of the nesting season.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I still think we need an ecologist to come out. I just really think that we're just missing the boat by not doing that, so I'm just putting that out there.
Unfortunately, I think that's an argument that the Conservation Commission is not willing to take up.
I know. I
Yeah,
just said it
and
one
we
more time.
hopefully the Board of Selectmen in their
Oh,
role
good.
will
I have one person to pester.
will welcome such a presentation.
Good.
Are we done editing?
Yep.
Okay, two changes then, the addition that Jim has given us on the first paragraph and the deletion of the last paragraph.
Okay.
Very good?
Yep.
May I've got this on my machine. Shall I make the changes and stick Marjorie's signature on it?
That would be easy, yes.
It would be done.
All right, moving on. And I want to thank the public for their input. They've been dedicated in coming forward and very supportive of the town's goals. All right, moving on to item 5, referral from zoning commission, floodplain regulations.
Oh, I will add a CC for the town manager.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi. The zoning commission has been requested by Department of Environmental and Energy Protection to update floodplain regulations. We're missing some definitions and regulations which are requirements in order to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. So what you have, a memo dated March 20th, 2018, as the floodplain administrator for the town. I went through and identified all the changes, and this is a 3-page memo along with all the definitions. In interest of time, I'll kind of summarize. There are new definitions which are required to be in the regulations in Article 4B on the first page. On the second page, there are 4 definitions that are in the current zoning regulations which need to be modified. One is the definition of basement. 2, the definition of development. 3, improvement, substantial improvement. And lastly is the definition of structure. As I said, all these changes are participation requirements. Next is in Article 7M, the floodplain zone. Subsection 2 now will be identifying the current flood insurance study, or FIS, along with the current flood insurance rate map, or FIRM, for Hartford County, and the designations of flood hazards that are contained within these 2 documents, AE and mapped floodways. We'll talk about the A zone later. AE and the mapped floodway are ones that have a detailed study, elevations are provided. So subsection 3 is an administration, dealing with how if there are structures that are built to previous firms and/or regulations, provided they were built in accordance with the regulation and flood maps that were in play at the time, they're considered grandfathered, they're protected. It's not like homeowners are going to be told you're in violation. Next is the duties and responsibilities of the floodplain administrator. These outline certain activities which we are required to do as part of our reviews for all activities in the floodplain. There's 15 items that are required. We're doing these activities right now as a certified floodplain manager and making sure that applicants are following these. Next is provision for flood hazard reduction. This kind of gives a checklist for both homeowners and contractors, the intent and some of the activities that could be implemented in order to reduce the loss of life or property in a flood event. Next is has to deal with watercourses of which a base flood elevation or an unnumbered A zone or adopted floodways are not part of those are the A zones or the unstudied watercourses. What are the recommendations both for the applicant and also for the permitting agency? We follow these. The commission may recall there was a application up on Castor Bridge Crossing for replacement of those temporary culverts there. As part of the review, I required that the engineer determine the base flood elevation for that watercourse. That was an unnumbered A, and design those box culverts so that they met the flood standards, meaning you didn't create a situation where you're damming the watercourse or worse, deflecting it to another property. This just it codifies what we're doing. Next is specific instructions. There's a breakdown between residential and non-residential. Residential, you have to meet the freeboard requirements for new construction or substantial improvements, meaning you're elevating your finished floor 2 feet above the base flood elevation, and same thing with your utilities. If it's non-residential, they have an option. They can flood-proof the structure, meaning a dry flood-proof where they're preventing floodwaters from entering, or they elevate to the same freeboard requirement of 2 feet above the base flood elevation. Lastly is Article 12, Zoning Board of Appeals. There is now a section dealing with floodplain variances and procedures. FEMA used the term variance to grant relief, although it is a variance in the sense of relief to the zoning regulations, but there are very, very specific situations where variances to the floodplain standards are recommended, and these are now outlined in our regs. So this is, like I said, this is required for participation in the National Flood Insurance Program. It's set for a hearing on April 16th for the Zoning Commission. I wanted to make sure that this commission, it was referred to the Planning Commission, also was aware of these changes. If you have any questions or you want to send any comments to the Zoning Commission, we could take them up now, or
Can I just ask, who did the drafting?
the drafting for...
The changes in the actual language? Was it done by council, or was it provided by?
It was provided by the National Flood Insurance Coordinator, Diane Ipkovich, at the Connecticut DEP, and I reviewed it with her based on trying to fit it into our regulations.
Okay. Has our
So-
council looked at it at all? Our town council? or anything?
This has not been forwarded to the council yet. This is one of the deals where you have, in order to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, you have to adopt their language. You cannot really stray from their language.
Right. I just
So-
want to make sure we understand what liability we do and don't have by adopting, you know what I mean? And for participating and don't, and what the changes
If we don't
mean
adopt
for
these
us.
changes, we can be placed in probation, meaning if there is a flood event in town, everyone who has a flood insurance policy, your policy is put on hold. There are no payouts. So, they are not mandating us at this point, but it's,
Oh, no, I
we
just
need
want
to
to make
do
sure it was
this.
more,
We need to
that
do
we're
this
understanding
quick.
what the changes actually mean
there
for
will
us. in
be
the
also
language.
updates to the subdivision regulations pertaining to development of floodplain. I'll forward those to you when the planning commission sets that for a hearing too. So,
Like you and I spoke a few weeks ago about the new atlas of flooding. Is that implied in this, or?
NOAA, you're talking about the NOAA Atlas for participation. I'll share, I was invited as one of there was it's about a dozen of us who were community officials to participate in the State Association of Floodplain Managers chose the Connecticut chapter of Floodplain Managers to host a flood synopsis to talk about floodplain issues, both coastal and riverine in the state of Connecticut, and long-term. Are we doing a good job? Are we taking into effect climate change or other aspects that may be changing how we approach? And there was a presentation by NOAA. NOAA, they put out it's called NOAA Atlas 14, which is like this new software to show what exactly is the 100-year precipitation that's occurring. The frequencies of seeing a 50-year storm. It's not the same as just going by the straight percentage and say, well, I have 50 years to see it. It's happening at a greater rate, and because precipitation in the 10-year storm is increasing, now are you designing for the appropriate storms to protect people and/or resources? I will share that with the group if you're interested. It hasn't circuited and posted yet,
It
so.
would seem as if that would imply, I mean, it already sort of implies that design for culverts and things, that standards we've historically used for culverts and the like are arguably obsolete.
Well, the rationale method that's using the rational method versus there's a newer method in engineering practices, which under our engineering practice guides, we require for larger developments. It may be something that we should be amending and including it for the smaller scale projects. Because the rational method is the dated method based on, our precipitation models for the state of Connecticut for stormwater design were done in 1961. So they're a little dated.
But does it also imply that floodplain definitions, for example, are in flux as well?
No. FEMA's not going to change that, but what could happen down the road is FEMA could remap the area. Because I guess to get back to the Hartford County maps were last adopted in 2008. And that was part of a map modernization program where basically the previous firms were the old white maps with just streets shown on them. They basically digitized these maps onto aerial photographs so to better depict where the floodplain is located. However, it was not a restudy. The STAR program, which I was a community official at the time down in New London County, the coastal communities, we received re-engineered, restudied maps. The rumor is that one day maybe Hartford County would see such a product. The National Flood Insurance Program right now is still pending reauthorization, so that's a whole other discussion that could take a little time. But if you have any comments or the commission wants to send something, the Planning Commission found that these regs were consistent with the goals and objectives of the Plan of Conservation Development last Tuesday. If we had a meeting 2 weeks ago, we could maybe take some time. Because this is on a short track, I mean, I can't really delay.
So you're just looking for approval from our, or
Recommendation, if the
recommendation to
commission
pres-
wishes to grant one on these,
Okay, and you need it now.
unfortunately.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I mean, I read the stuff and I didn't see anything that seemed averse to our interests.
And since we're using their language that we're required to use, there's really not much that we can alter, I would think, or anything we can alter. So do we need a motion for the recommendation?
If you want to send a recommendation, I'd prefer that it be done in a
Does the commission
motion.
feel that they would, are comfortable enough at this point to make a recommendation?
I had one more question. Is there anything in the changes of the regulations and the way they're drawn that you think would be, are going to be onerous on Simsbury residents at all?
No, because actually, if you think of it, the goals and objectives of the National Flood Insurance Program is to reduce the loss of life and reduce the loss of property. These regulations, along with the proper practice of following them, would achieve those two goals. So.
But they're not onerous, those
They're-
are
These are,
to follow.
in order to, the thing is, the status quo of, let's say, building to a lesser standard, from an insurance perspective, there's proven studies that if you mitigate by raising a structure 2 feet above the base flood elevation versus building it at the base flood elevation, there's a substantial savings to the homeowner. They see it in their insurance policies. Like, for example, if you're 4 feet below the base flood elevation, you're paying approximately $9,000 a year for insurance for a structure. If you're at the base flood elevation, I think it's $4,000 a year. If you're 2 feet above or meeting our existing freeboard requirement, your premium is reduced to $1,000. So there's a noticeable financial savings to meeting the goals and objectives of the National Flood Insurance Program, along with what's outlined in the proposed text.
But as you mentioned, nothing in, as long as everybody that already has, as long as anything that was built to the criteria at that time, they're fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's one other thing, in some of the new terms, in the term substantially damaged, what that will allow for homeowners is, because now we have their definition in our regs, a homeowner, should there be a disaster declared in Hartford County, could apply for an ICC grant, which is called an increased cost compliance. They can be awarded up to $30,000 to either raise, relocate, or demolish their house. So, I mean, there's a lot of financial benefits to following the recommendations of the program to homeowners. Sorry.
Do we want to communicate to zoning?
I would think it would be in the interest of our citizens to do so.
I will offer a motion, you can amend it as soon as I speak it out of my mouth. I move that we ask staff to communicate to the zoning commission that we have found nothing in the proposed new flood stuff, or words to that effect, that raises a concern in our minds from either a conservation or a wetlands and watercourses point of view.
We'll change stuff to text amendments?
Yeah, that's-
Yeah, that's
yeah.
a good, yeah, all right.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, good.
Thank you.
All right, and Mike, you wanted to discuss the
You have a correspondence dated March 14th from Gifts of Love. This is concerning, they're requesting a as-of-right determination for the installation of deer fencing around one of the fields located to the southwest of the transfer station on Wolcott Road. I relayed one of the concerns to them about putting any kind of delineation on the fencing itself so that it'll add into the protection of deer. They've had an issue with this particular field where they've lost significant amount of crops just because it's open. I walked it with them and the NRCS, and it was a recommendation. Unfortunately, where the fence wants to go, it's in mapped wetland soils, so.
But these are thin posts, they're thin.
These are garden stakes,
Garden
basically,
stakes.
that's wired, 2 wires are attached to it. There's 3D anti-deer fencing attachment to their correspondence, along with a illustration that'll show what it looks like in the field.
And I like the fact that they say that in event of a flood, they could remove it within 2 hours.
There's a portion of the property that's that nips the floodplain, so.
They want a determination of if this is an as-of-right.
Pursuant to section 4.1A of the Simsbury regulations. Yep.
Does anyone have any questions? Would anyone like to make a motion that it's as-of-right?
I'll make a motion that we find that this is an as-of-right activity under section 4.1A.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any dissents? All right, thank you. All right, so the last item, unless there's any correspondence or announcements, I'd like a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a second?
Second.
You want to stay on it. All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you very much.
Marjorie,
Yes.
one thing we had in our packet.
What was that?